Hi, everyone. Today I want to talk about citing poetry. I just want to make sure we're on the right page regarding citing our poems. So what are the kind of like three major points about citing poetry? Number one, we use line numbers. So you have to count the line numbers. If it's not written in your anthology, you just have to count the line numbers starting from line one. Number two, we use the word line in the first citation of the poem. So if we're going to cite the poem 6 times, the first citation will say lines 2 and 3, and then every subsequent citation will just have 5, 6, 7, right, depending on where you're citing in the poem. Number 3, we use the slash between lines of poetry. And actually we use the double slash for when if there's a stanza break. So if you're quoting the last line of a stanza and then the first lines of another stanza, you would use the double slash for the stanza break. So, all right, for standard quotes, standard or integrated quoting, make sure that you have that sentence that kind of introduces the quote. I always tell students to make sure you have the author's name kind of before the quotation. That way you don't have to put the name in the citation itself. If you name the author before the quote, you do not need to put the author's name in the citation. So you're saying Dickinson personifies death, and then you're quoting lines 2 through 4. Notice that you're using the punctuation that appears at the end of the line of the poem, and then you're using the slash. Now, the period of the whole sentence goes at the end of the citation itself, because remember, the citation is part of the sentence. So it can't just hang out on its own in the wind. It has to be included inside the sentence, and the period is the end of the sentence. So make sure that the period goes outside of the line numbers. All right, for a long quote. Long quotes, not only poetry, but just sort of anything, even like prose. If you're going to quote 4 lines or more, you have to double tab. So right here, this space here is 2 tabs. All right, and it becomes in a block. You want to think of it like block quoting. So if you're doing 4 lines or more of poetry or even of a prose, you have to tab twice to start the quote, and notice that there are no quotation marks. There are no quotation marks. If you're block quoting, you have no quotation marks. Now, this is an interesting thing. At the end here, you'll see that the period is not there, because for block quoting, the punctuation is going to be here. Now, I'm quoting line 8, which has the dash as the final punctuation, but let's pretend for a second, just pretend that this line ended with a period. Okay, the punctuation goes there. The punctuation, there's no punctuation after that line number. So that's the difference between the standard or integrated quoting, right? You have the period there. If it's block quoting, the end punctuation appears before the citations. It's sort of like the difference between the two. All right, so let's review. For poetry, we use line numbers. We use the word line in the first citation or lines. We use the slash between lines. We're going to use let me write this down for you. Use the double slash between stanza breaks. Now for standard or integrated quoting, this is a standard quote, right? You have to have the quotation marks, the slash between lines, and then the citation, and then the period. For long quotes, again, it's block. You have to do 2 tabs. This is a 2 tab, 2 tab, 2 tab, 2 tab, and then the citation. And the period goes in front of the citation. Now, I'm going to tell everyone to always be very leery of quoting more than 4 lines. And why is that? Because long quotes require a long analysis. So you have to be ready to analyze every single line that you quote. So I always encourage students to quote 3 or less lines. It's just easier on your analysis. All right, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Let me know if you have any questions.